All right, we ready? Let's go. Ecclesiastes 4. Don't ask me to review because I have no recollection whatsoever of the first three chapters. After a week laying out on the beach in Mexico, it's all futile. It doesn't mean anything anyway. So, seriously, why go back after it? Yeah, tonight is going to be very, I think it's very practical. I think tonight's a very practical lesson. And so, obviously, we're not going to talk a whole lot about Calvary, all right, and God and all those things, but some very good practical lessons that I want you to really consider. A lot of life principles, you'll see it. And it's always amazing to me that 3,000 years, humanity hasn't changed one bit. We are exactly the same people that Solomon was dealing with. Technology doesn't change us that much. It just doesn't change our personalities. And I think that's why I love history, because when I look at history, I see personality. So I see the characters and I see their personalities and their inclinations and their phobias and their just sort of that id personality of how they want to feed themselves and the ego and all those things. That's what makes history. And so anyway, I won't bore you with any more history lessons. All right, 4, we ready? Let's go. Again, he starts with this word again, because he's been doing what? If someone asks you, describe for me or explain to me what is sort of the genre, what's the angle of Ecclesiastes? How would you describe Ecclesiastes to someone? Not adjective. Tell me, well, it's Solomon probably writing what? Talk to me out loud. Introspection on life. Okay. From what perspective? What is unique about Solomon? What, the angle from which he is looking, is it different than the average? He's looking down on everyone else? Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think at this point you don't even call this person wealthy. It's just whatever you want, you can just have, and you can go get it. So I always love that he didn't plant trees, he planted forests. He didn't build a ship, he built a fleet. All right. What do you mean by that? Unpack that just a little bit. He's too wise for his own good. Good. Yeah. So at some point, is there sort of a curve to this thing that it becomes detrimental? That your wisdom and your free time and your introspection eventually becomes a negative thing? Think too much? Yeah. Mm-hmm. What if the angle was reversed? What if Joe Jerusalem writes what it's like to be Solomon up in the ivory tower? We have Solomon writing from the ivory tower of what it's like to be Joe Jerusalem. What if the angle was changed? What do you think that would look like? What do you think that would sound like? Would it sound like everything is futile? It's all a pursuit of the wind? It's beautiful up there. Everything's great. Life is so hard for me, but it's so good for them. So, yeah, literally. I always love the quote. Go ahead. Yeah, but we do this, don't we? We do this now and that's why I say 3,000 years, nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. The witch, the rich, the witch and the famous, the rich and the famous look down on us as, well, I'd hate to be them. You imagine having to go to Walmart, all right, and buy things there, all right? And we look up at them and go, wow, what would it be like to be them? And you can just snap your fingers and a car shows up and all that stuff. So, good. All right, let's go. Again, I observed all the acts of oppression. You may have a different word here. Interesting. In the Greek, this is literally the word sycophant. All right? Everything is sycophant. Does anybody know the definition of sycophant? A sycophant is someone who gains an advantage by flattering other people. So a fan, we get our word fan from this, or fanatic comes from this. So it's the idea that you compliment someone so that you endear yourself to someone rich, famous, and whatever, and so you gain an advantage by this. I don't know that it translates straight. The Hebrew is a little different from it. It's more the act of, I've observed all these acts of oppression, this lowering, being done under the sun. Remember that phrase? All right, this idea of just not under heaven. All right, remember the difference? Under heaven, under the sun, a little different. Just one's more practical, one's more secular. The other is sort of a cosmic view of life. So I've observed all the acts of oppression being done under the sun. Look at the tears of those who are oppressed. All right, so there's this holding down. You're being held down. So I've observed all this, and look at the tears of those who've been oppressed. They have no one to what? What's your word? Comfort, everybody? All right, this is that word parakaleo in the Greek. All right, para next to, kaleo to call out, to invite, to urge, to motivate, to what Romans 12:1, therefore by the mercies of God I urge you to present your bodies a living sacrifice. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. All right, so I see the acts of oppression and I see the tears, and they have no one to comfort them. All right, this goes back to Matthew 5:4. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. But Solomon looks at these and he says, no one's there to comfort them. How many people in our world live this? They are oppressed and they have no one to give them any comfort, no one to come alongside them. All right? This is a lot of our world, isn't it? There's a loneliness to our world. And the wealthier you get, the more people you have around to comfort you, right? So the suicide rate is far lower for the wealthy people, right? No. Money doesn't buy you comfort. It buys you stuff, all right? They have no one to comfort them. Power or strength, iskuo, power is with those who oppress them. They have no one to comfort them. You get that second phrase. What is this? Power is with those who oppress them. Is the person who oppresses others, are they powerful over that one person? Okay. Do we see this play out in our world? There is a strength and a power. If you are the one oppressing, if you're on offense, are you the one with strength and power? I mean, look at our culture. What happens if you say the wrong thing in our culture? Canceled. Is that power? Ask the person who's been canceled. Ask the person who's been on defense, who just said something, didn't mean anything by it, but yet what does the culture do to them? You're canceled now. That's power. And these are people who are being oppressed, and they have no one to comfort them. So what happens when someone gets canceled in our culture? Who comes to their defense? What happens when you come to someone's defense who has been canceled? Welcome to the cancel train. You're next, all right? And that's the thing. Eventually, it'll eat up everybody. So do you just sit on the sidelines and go, well, I'm not going to get involved? Well, you can do that, but eventually what's going to happen? Unless you totally cave, you're going to be next. Because they have no one to comfort them, no one to come beside them and call out to them and comfort them and urge them and motivate them and invite them into something. No one to defend them. You see this? Again, 3,000 years later, our culture is exactly the same. And Solomon is watching this. He's seeing people oppressed, and he's seeing no one coming to their aid. No one coming to comfort them. And he's just devastated by this. Verse 2, so I admired the dead We have a different word for admired. What is it? Thought. Okay. It's to give good thought. All right. So it's not a bad word. All right. Praise is another way of saying I praise the dead. Okay. I praise the dead who have already died. And you see this phrase. I wish the Holman translation would translate it more literally, because what they do in the original is they'll use the word twice, once in a verb form and once in a noun form. So the dead who have died, the living who are alive, all right? The oppressed in their oppression, those who labor in their labor. And I wish they would do that, because you would see it over and over throughout Ecclesiastes, but they want to try and make it readable for you, okay? So I admire the dead who have already died more than the living who are still alive. Why does he admire the dead? Because they no longer face oppression with no one to comfort them. They're already gone. Man, they're lucky, because those who are alive face what? Oppression with no one to comfort them, okay? But better than either of them is the one who has not yet existed, become, the one who has not become. Those are the lucky ones. So when do you become unlucky? When you're born. Congratulations. Isn't this uplifting? Isn't this amazing? So if it's really awesome to not have been born yet, because you haven't faced any oppression whatsoever. But as soon as you're born, what's going to happen? Oppression with no one to comfort you until the day you die, and now you don't face oppression any longer. Yay! Isn't this fun? All right. But again, isn't this life? Isn't this life? So what's the solution to this? If he's watching this and he's saying oppression, 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 literally the oppression of those who are oppressed, and there is a lacking of comfort, what's the lesson? What's the remedy to the oppression? Don't be born. Besides, don't be born. What's the answer? Comfort. To be the one who does come alongside someone and call out to them, invite them, urge them, encourage them, comfort them. All these words, same word, okay? Parakaleo. This is what we want to be. The Holy Spirit is the what? What do we call him in the Greek? Y'all remember? He is the comforter, but in the Greek word, you know what it is? The paraclete. Y'all have heard this word before? Or parakletos is sort of the masculine version of it, all right? It's the same word from parakaleo, all right? So the paraclete, the Holy Spirit, is the one who comforts, the one who guides, urges, all right? The one who comes along beside you and calls out to you. And this is what he sees. There's oppression, 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 and there's no one there. And Jesus says what? It's good that I go away, because if I go away, what will happen? The Parakletos will come. Is there a remedy there? Only if you see it. Only if you receive it, all right? Far too many Christians just live their life without any regard for what the Holy Spirit is speaking and saying, all right? So you've got to pay attention. All right, so admired the ones who are dead more than the living, but better than that, the one who hasn't existed, who has not seen the evil activity that is done where? Under the sun, on a daily basis, all right? 4, I saw, he sees a lot, right? You see this word in verse 1, I observed. Verse 4, I saw. In verse 7, I saw. All right, so in verse 15, I saw. You get this over and over. He's just observing, all right, being introspective. I saw all the labor and all the skillful work. The labor is the struggle, the day-to-day, the hard labor, all right? And all the skillful work, the doing, all right? Does anybody see a difference in those? What's a profession that is just labor versus one that is a skill? All right? How many of you work in air conditioning? And how many of you don't? All right? I don't know, public school, if y'all have air conditioning or not. So it kind of goes both ways. Recess is labor. All right? Other class, that's just doing, okay? So he sees both of these things. I just wanted you to see that. This is an interesting point. Listen, watch this. It's not a great translation, but it gets the point across, I think, really well. I saw all labor and all skillful work is due to, and that's not, that word's not there, but it's implied, due to a man's jealousy of his friend. Pretty observant for 3,000 years ago. So all of our labor and all of our work is due to man's jealousy of his friends. What do we call that? Keeping up with the Joneses, exactly. Luckily, we've grown out of that, right? No, not even close. Not even close. Now, is that a bad thing? I mean, ambition. Is ambition a good thing or a bad thing? It depends. Both. I don't want to answer the question yet because we're going to continue down this road a little bit. But I want you to get that mindset. How much of what I do is it so that I can have the nicer car, the nicer house, and not so much just nicer, period, nicer than, again, the Joneses. Oh, he got that, I want that. Oh, he got that, I want that. All right? And this one-upsmanship, okay? Any of you have siblings that you do this with? No? I think siblings are the worst at this sometimes, all right? You don't do that, Tiffany? Okay. All right. Okay. This too is what? Futile and a pursuit of the wind, a chasing after the wind. 5, look at this. Because you're going to see 3 categories here. And I want you to find the 3 categories in this little phrase. The fool folds his arms. You may have different language on that. Idle hands. Okay. That's not a great translation, but it's where the author's going with it. In the Greek, it's to peri, which means around, and lambano is to receive. So to receive your hands around. In the Hebrew, it's more of a folding of the hands. Okay? In Proverbs, on 2 occasions, it talks about the lazy person. A little more sleep, a little more slumber, a little folding of the hands. Okay? So the fool folds his arms or his hands and consumes his own flesh. Now, in the Greek, this is the word autophagy. Okay? Autophagy means what, Chris? You know? It's kind of a medical term, so what? Yeah, phagy is eating. It's eating yourself. Okay? Now, in nutrition terms or in physical therapy terms or whatever, this is what the effect of fasting. So if people say, I'm going to do a fast, they talk about the effects of autophagy. And it always cracks me up when I hear these like trainers and stuff throw out, well, the autophagy. And I'm like, dude, that means eating yourself. Your body is literally eating yourself, okay? And eventually what happens when your body starts eating itself? It runs out of self to eat. And at that point, what happens to you? You die, okay? So the fool folds his arms and consumes his own flesh. So if I don't work, I run out of money and I don't eat. You're an idiot, okay? Go to work, okay? And sometimes I wish our government would go, you know what? We're out of money. You may need to find something to do. Which I've always thought interesting that we always say we have to have all these illegal immigrants to come in and work the fields. And at the same time, we have social safety nets for people who don't want to work or can't find a job. I'm like, we're bringing in the illegals to work the fields and we're paying people not to work in the fields. Why don't we just shift them around and they'll start to work? We were in Mexico. I said, what was our cab driver or our driver, Manuel? He says, yeah, I came to the United States for about 4 years. My girlfriend was there or something. He says, then I came back. He said, I wanted to work hard. I wanted to do this. I was like, I think we need to work out a trade in our country. We'll take you guys that want to work hard, and the ones who don't want to work hard, we'll export. All right? And so this is what he says. The fool does this. All right? Now, and understand this, all right? The Bible's saying the fool is the one who refuses to work. All right? The one who refuses to work will consume his own flesh. What does Paul tell the Thessalonians? The one who does not work should not eat. Okay? And that was in a context of Jesus is coming back, so I'm going to quit my job. And Paul's going, no, because then you're going to be living off somebody else, and you're going to be the problem in your society. So get back to work so that you aren't in your society, okay? So the fool does this. Verse 6. So the fool is one category, right? Okay? And let's be clear. I'm not talking about people who are incapable of working, all right? This is the fool who says, I'm just going to sit here. I'm just going to sit here and just not do anything because I don't want to, okay? The fool, that's the fool. Better one handful with rest, all right? And this is the Greek word pause, all right? It's a very common word for rest, than two handfuls with effort, or this idea of suffering, laborious suffering, and a pursuit of the wind. All right, so what are my three categories? Number one was what? The fool just, I ain't going to work. All right, well, you're going to have autophagy until you die, okay? Then you have one handful, all right? And handful just means I've acquired this much, but I have rest. Is rest a good thing? Yeah. Or I can have two handfuls, and I can have labor, suffering, labor, and pursuit of the wind. Because what happens when I die? What happens to my two handfuls when I die? Okay? I always tell this with grades. You know, you can make all A's, but, you know, you probably work too hard. But if you made all C's, you're just too lazy. You need to be a B student, all right? That's where I kind of fit in. I was a straight B student, all right? My 3.0, I'm good. I can settle right there because I had fun in college and I got B's, okay? Now, there were people who got A's and didn't have any fun in college. And there were people who had C's and had way too much fun. One of the guys at Florida State with him, he was a tight end on full ride scholarship at Florida State. He gets there. He finishes the first semester with a 0.2 GPA. I was like, that takes effort. You can make a 0.0, all right? But to get a 0.2, he got a D in one class. He had a 0.2, and they said, you're out of here. See you later. It's been nice having you, all right? That's the fool who's crossing his hands because he just doesn't want to work. Plus, there was a bar right at the end of the road from the football dorm, and he was Norm to the bar. Let's just put it that way, all right? But think about these categories. Do you agree with these categories? The fool, obviously, yeah, you're an idiot, okay? You need to work. You need to provide. You need to not die of starvation, okay? That's just a fool. If you get one handful, but you have rest, is that better than having two handfuls and have a life of laborious suffering and chasing after the wind? Susan, you're struggling with this. Yeah, no, yeah. To move on to the next level. Yeah. Oh, yeah, no, and please don't hear me saying that you have to be one or the other. I think what he's talking about is really stages of life. I agree. In medical fields, look, I got a marketing degree. I always say I got a volleyball degree, and I went to marketing classes every now and then, okay? So, because that's all I did, all right? Literally, I was like 8 hours a day on a volleyball court somewhere on campus. And I went to marketing classes, and I got my B's. And you know what? I got a wonderful job selling cellular phones back when they were 23 cents a minute to talk on them and $1,000. I sold 3, I think, before I went into the ministry, okay? So, yeah, that's one thing. even our kids. Caden, he's probably going to work at Chick-fil-A. He doesn't need to make all A's, kill himself. Court, if he wants to go physical therapy or orthopedic surgeon like I keep pushing, absolutely, he's got to do that. Now, what happens in the next stage of life? You're about to welcome a little boy, okay? Now, do you want to keep working as hard as you worked in school to make those all A's, to get those 2 handfuls? Or do you want to go, you know what? This is enough if I get to play with my little boy. And I think stages of life can change in this. So I'm with you. It is dumb to say one or the other, okay? And I think there are times you do need to go on vacation and fold your arms and lay out on the beach, all right? But you don't stay there, all right? You get back. It's the balance of life. Everybody with me? And again, 3,000 years later, we're still struggling with this. Because how many people want the 2 handfuls? And they think, if I can only get the 2 handfuls, then I'll have rest. But what happens? There's always a bigger handful. And add to that what? Why are you doing this? Why are you trying to get the 2 handfuls? Because that'll make you happy? Well, that's another problem, right? The leaving it, I think that's the pursuit of the wind thing, all right? What happens to the Joneses? What happens if I have my 1 handful and I have peace and rest, and then I look over at my neighbor and now they have a 100-foot RV, or if they get a new boat, or they got something else? Now I'm like, ooh, I got to get back in the game, get the 2 handfuls again. Because then I'll be happy, okay? Now, I know none of us suffer from that, but other people do, right? Yeah, you get poor neighbors. Yeah, that's the whole thing. There you go. I like it. I like where you're going with that. All right, very good. All right, good. 7. Again, I saw futility where? Under the sun. All right, what's he seeing this time? Verse 8. There is a person without a companion. Now, what you see in this text, verse, all the way through verse 12, what you're going to see this idea, there is one without a 2. Literally the language is, there's a 1 without a 2 or a second, okay? And that second is the one that gives companionship, encouragement, comfort, all right, that he's talking about earlier. So watch for this. When you see 1 and there's not another or a second, that's the literal language here. Again, I saw if you to understand, there is a person, 1, without a 2, a companion, without even a son or brother. And though there is no end to all his struggles, is that labor, right? His eyes are still not content with riches. Now, this is a miserable person, isn't it? There's 1, he doesn't have another. He doesn't even have a son or a brother. Who does he have? There's just 1. And there's no end to all of his struggles. Why? Because what's he doing? There's 2 handfuls with labor. This is this guy, all right? 2 handfuls without struggle. And his eyes, literally his ayin, his eyes, are still not content, satisfied with his riches. When I was reading through this, I was like, that's Scrooge from A Christmas Carol. Y'all with me? This is this guy, all right? He just wants more. He just wants more. And even though he has more and has everything he could ever possibly want, what does he want? More, all right? And just more. There's always more, all right? And he labors and he struggles and he doesn't have anybody in his life. He has no companionship, nobody there for him at all. And he asks this question, who am I struggling for? Now that's a moment of introspection. And most people don't do this. Most people get so caught up, nose to the grindstone, going after it, doing their thing, doing this. They never step back and go, why am I doing this? You see so many wealthy people who just want to provide for their families, right? If I can just provide. They're multi-billionaires, and they're going, I just got to work 48 more hours today because I want to provide for my family. And their family is like scary, right? You've met these kids. Their parents are wealthy beyond belief. They've got everything they've ever wanted, and they're brats, miserable brats. I had a cousin who got a brand new Maserati for his 16th birthday. Don't you appreciate the way his father was providing for him? He was arrested within 2 years in Houston. They lived in Fort Worth. He was arrested in Houston. Dad got the call, drove down there immediately, and went and bailed him out. My dad just looked at me, because we were the same age. My dad just looked at me and goes, you would have just gotten comfy. Because, no. But again, what am I struggling for? I always wish my uncle would have stepped back and gone, why am I giving this kid? This kid needs like a 1982 Ford Ranger stick shift, all right? That's what he needs, all right? But here's the thing. Who am I struggling for, yes? And depriving myself of that which is good or better, maybe a little better translation, that which is better. I could back off on it. Why am I killing myself for this? Who? And I think that's the question. Who am I doing this for? And I think that's a question our society needs to ask. Who am I doing this for? If I'm out here trying to make all this money for my family, your family's going, we're good. We'd like to just see you every now and then. We'd like to spend time with you. We don't need the trip with all the bells and the whistles. We don't need the fancy cars. We don't need the big houses. We just want to see you. And there's a balance there that Solomon observes, right? And it's amazing that he observes this, because this is almost a personal, private thing. This is not something you readily notice, is it? This too is futile, and it's a miserable, or literally it's the word for evil occupation. It's an evil occupation to be a person without a second, no end to your struggles, your eyes are still not content with riches, and you're asking the question, who am I struggling for and depriving myself for good? This is evil. All right? 9, 2 are better than 1. Okay, here's that same idea, 2 and 1. All right? One is bad, 2 is better. Okay? 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward. In the Greek, it's more the idea of wages. They have a good reward for their labor, their struggling, their amal. Okay? For if either falls, or if one falls, this is the translation. If one falls, his companion, his second, can do what? Lift him up. But if there's only one and you have no companion, when you fall, what happens to you? You stay down, okay? The one picks you up. And this is where he's going to use that 1 and 2. When you have a 1, you need a 2, okay? But pity or woe, oi, in the Greek, oi vey, the one, all right, there's your one, who falls without the second to lift him up. 11, and if 2 lie down together, they can keep warm. But how can one person alone keep warm without the 2? Okay? Common sense, pretty simple. Nothing fancy to this, okay? And here's a third example, because the first one is if you fall down, if you're lying down and you're cold, all right? And then if someone overpowers one person, 2 can resist him, all right? Or 2 can go against him or battle with him. And this is a phrase you've heard all before. A cord of 3 strands, or a threefold cord, literally, is not quickly broken. All right? We've all heard that phrase before, right? So that idea of if you have one and you're all alone, you're in trouble. All right? You need that companionship. You need that comfort. Again, so go back to the front. I look and all I see is what? Oppression everywhere, because they have no one to comfort them, no one to come alongside them. All right? And then you have the example, there's a person without someone who's killing themselves, working themselves to death, and he kind of looks back and goes, why am I doing this? There's no benefit to this. So what is Solomon going to see? What's he driving at? Loneliness is not good. That we were not created for isolation. We were not created to try and take on the world by ourselves, because there's a benefit to being in relationships. You encourage each other, you strengthen each other, you give comfort to each other, you do all these things. That's the beauty of the church eventually, all right? And that's what I hated about COVID. So many people isolated themselves. They just got in their house and they said, I'm just going to sit here. Hopefully I won't die, all right? And sadly, I think the enemy's played on this very well and just said, you should probably stay. You should probably stay where you are. Don't get out. And we kind of go, oh, well, I need to stay safe because I don't want to get sick and die. Well, do you want to stay isolated and be lonely and have no one to comfort you? And even worse, no one for you to comfort? I think that's where most people kind of fall in line, and that I try and challenge people. It's not so that you can have someone to comfort you. It's so that you can be a comforter to someone else. That's the beauty of life. Not having someone comfort you, but you being the one comforting someone else. All right? So again, there's that phrase for you if you ever wondered where that was in the Bible. It's Ecclesiastes 4. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken or easily broken. Now, this is weird. This last man, every commentary I've read is like, we're not sure exactly what this means, okay? So this last paragraph, I'm not going to stand too hard on anything. It's just a weird phrase, and I'm sure Solomon knew what he was saying, but it's kind of one of those moments where he said something, and we don't have anything to compare it to or anything to relate it to, and he's speaking clearly to something that he sees, but we just don't know what it is. So I'll do the best I can with it, and you guys can take whatever you want with it, and don't stand too hard on whatever I say, all right? 13, better is a poor but wise youth than an old but foolish king who no longer pays attention to warnings. Agree? Compare these. You've got a youth, a child. Youth is probably a better word for it than child. Who is poor, but he's wise. And you have a king who is old and he's foolish. And the definition he's using for foolish is he no longer knows or pay attention when someone says, beware. You need to watch out for this. Okay? So what happens to the one who is told, you need to be careful here. You need to pay attention. This could be a problem. And they go, whatever. They ignore the warnings. Is that a problem? What kind of person ignores warnings? Foolish? Give me a little more. Yeah, they think. Prideful, yeah, I know better. They think they can overcome anything that comes against him. You think Solomon would fit into that category? What will get him out of anything that comes against him? A wealth. No, it won't. And so he's saying, better a poor but wise youth. Now, you got to understand, in the Jewish culture, what's the value of age? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Good thing, yeah. Wisdom comes with age, but not here, is it? See, in this case, it's kind of flipped. There's this kid, and he's poor, but he's really wise. And so, but there's this older man who's a king, but he's really foolish. Why? Because he won't listen to warnings. I'm curious what King Charles is going to be like in England. At what point has he developed his wisdom? It's interesting in the text of the Bible. I'm trying to remember. I think it's in Numbers. Pretty sure it's in Numbers. No, probably Joshua. It says God left enemies in place so that the people of Israel would learn how to fight. That he didn't just wipe out the people, because if he just wiped them out and the people did not fight, they would lose the ability to fight. They would lose that combative, strategic nature to them. Things would become too easy, and they would not know how to handle conflict. So God left enemies in place. And God didn't just wipe out the Canaanites. He said, you're going to go in and you're going to fight, and I will be with you, and I will help you, but you're going to be the ones fighting. And in several cases, they didn't get rid of the enemies, right? And they became a trap and a snare to them, okay? But God says, I'm going to leave them in place so that you don't forget how to fight. Now, what about the king who never has to fight, who never has conflict, who's just handed everything? Or the prince, let's say it this way, what about the prince who is just handed everything all the time? How's he going to know how to govern? How about the rich kid or the middle income kid who's handed everything? And they turn 16 and they're like, hey, you need to go get a job. And they're like, what? A what? You mean I don't get my cell phone and my car and my clothes and my everything? What do you think that kid's going to be like when he's 22? And so this is sort of this progression that he's looking at, this poor but wise kid. If you're poor, you got to do what? You better learn how to work. You better learn how to make money. And he's wise. And this old guy's a fool. And he thinks he can buy his way out of anything. Okay? So again, Solomon may be looking in a mirror a little bit here. Because we believe he was older when he wrote this, we're guessing. All right? He may be kind of looking in the mirror going, what have I done? Who have I become? All right? Another theory, one commentary, another theory was he was comparing Saul, King Saul, to his father David, who David was the poor shepherd who was wise, and Saul was the foolish king who didn't listen to warnings and was killed at Mount Gilboa. And again, these are just theories. We don't know. 14, again, another weird one, but hopefully we can work it. For he, we're not sure who he is, he came from prison or the house of bondage to be king, and even though he was born poor in his kingdom. All right, anybody follow that? I'll read it one more time. For he came from prison to be king, even though he was born poor in his kingdom. I think the translation on that is kind of bad, because the implication is he came out of prison, became king, and returned to being poor. So the progression is, well, he was in prison and he was poor and he became king. He should not wind up back poor again. But the implication, and this is kind of what they're kind of guessing on this, is the person who is poor, even if he becomes king, that does not give him wisdom. That does not give him knowledge. That does not give him the ability to not go right back into the toilet where he came from. All right? Think lottery winners. You with me? You're poor. You win the lottery. Benny, did you ever sell any lottery tickets? All right, you sold a few of those? All right, anybody ever win? Few? All right. I always say the lottery is the tax on the mathematically challenged. All right? You'll get that in a little bit. All right? You win the lottery. Wow, life's great now. How long until you're back where you were? How often? I mean, they have whole reality shows about this, right? This is the idea. And he says, even if you come out of the prison and become king, unless your character and your wisdom comes with that progression, or you have that progression, you're going to be back where you started, because it will not overcome that. Your position, your title will not overcome that. Think Joseph. Joseph came out of the prison to be second in command, but he stayed there, right? Why? Because God was with him. God was giving him wisdom. Daniel, what happens to him? Captured as a kid, becomes second in command, because his wisdom, this excellent spirit that was in him, Daniel 6:3, maintained his position. all right? But if you gain that position without the knowledge and the wisdom, you fall back into it. And again, do we see this ever? Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. See how these are, this is just, I'm having to like mine for this stuff. So please, again, don't take this as gospel. All right. 15, I saw all the living who move about where? Under the sun, follow a second youth who succeeds him. We're not sure who him is, all right? But there's people following a successor, all right? So take that for what it's worth. 16, and there is no limit to all the people who were before them, yet those who come later will not rejoice in him. And I think I know, you go, what? I think what Solomon is trying to say is, just because you become king, people are going to forget you. Your fame and fortune is not going to last forever. Why? Because they don't even rejoice in him. If you look in Exodus, the very first lines of Exodus, it talks about there was a new king who came to power in Egypt who did not know who Joseph was. How could you not know who Joseph was? Joseph saved Egypt. Now, in Egypt, they do histories, right? How did they do histories in Egypt, ancient Egypt? 4,000 years ago, Egypt. They wrote them on the walls. There's a picture on the wall, all right? It's not like you just, I don't know, all right? Not like your history class, all right? Lecture, memorize, regurgitate, forget, okay? No, these are on the walls of the buildings. So you can go back and go, hey, what was that? Who is that guy? Joseph was utterly forgotten. Now, most people believe because a new dynasty came into power that it wasn't just grandkid, but a new dynasty came into power, and it's like, yeah, we don't care who Joseph was. We have our own lineage, and Joseph is outside of that, all right? So this is that idea. It's all futile. Even if you do become king and everybody follows you and you succeed your father who was the king before you, you're going to die and no one's going to remember you. Think about that with our presidents. How many of us could name all 46 presidents? Don't try that, Nicole. You'll hurt yourself. Oh, I know. You can bust out the song. But could you tell me anything about them? Could you tell me, like, their personalities? No. We know names, but people are not going to remember you. And this is the nature of humanity. Still, 3,000 years later, it's still, no one's going to rejoice in him. And how does he end this chapter? Just like all the rest of them. This too, to become king, out of the prison house, to become king, that too is futile and a pursuit of the wind. Yay. So what do we see? And I love this because I think what's buried within this is that lesson. Be a comfort to someone else. That isolation, and I don't want to say singleness. Please don't hear me say the word singleness, because I believe singleness is a gift, and I think God can do amazing things with single people that he can't do with most of us married folks, all right? I know my college minister back in Tallahassee, First Baptist Tallahassee, he became the chaplain to the Florida State football team. And for the last long time, however long it's been, 36, 37 years, he's been the chaplain of the Florida State football team. Never got married, remained single. He's the chaplain of the football team and the baseball team. For 36, almost 40 years now, he's been able to, those are his kids. And because he doesn't have a wife, he's able to do this without distraction. I always think Louis and Shelley Giglio. They've never had kids. No one wants to ask why. But the fact that Louis Giglio doesn't have kids probably allows him to start the passion conferences, probably allows him to travel all around the world, probably allows him to do all these things with he and his wife, that they don't have kids to distract them and hold them down. Susan, welcome to being held down. All right. Somebody said, man, you don't look 54. I said, that's because I got rid of my kids. I'm much healthier and happier now. All right. So it's like, yay. All right. They do. No, they don't. Yeah, no, they do. I got one coming home this weekend. So we just got rid of one. Now we got another coming home this weekend. All right. As long as they don't stay, I'm okay. Yeah, no, we'll see. But it's that singleness, just for the sake of singleness, it is devastating to a life. To have no one to lean on, to have no one to comfort you, to have no one in your life that encourages you and challenges you. And even more so, that you don't have someone that you are encouraging. That you don't have someone going, you know what, it's okay if our boat is not the same size as the Joneses. It's okay if we live in a house that's smaller than your brother's. It's okay. I love you. We're all good. I'd rather have the one handful and have peace and rest and spend time with you than have two handfuls and never see you. And so I think what Solomon is seeing is the beauty of companionship and the beauty of relationships. And so what you see throughout this whole thing is that idea of two is better than one. Two is better than one. And again, I don't want to in any way demean singleness. Like I said, Clint has done infinitely more ministry than I ever will. And Louis, even more so. But for the rest of us, there's a beauty to that companionship. There's a beauty to that, being able to have someone and being that someone for somebody else. And it does. And please don't hear me either say everybody has to get married, okay? Because that's not the point. There's nothing in here about marriage. Now, marriage can clearly be implied in this, but just to have that companionship and to be that companion, I think is what Solomon is pointing out is to the beauty of it, okay? Any questions? I like next week. I really like next week. It's challenging, very challenging. So, all right, cool. Let's pray. Father, I thank you again for preserving these scriptures for us, just for these thousands of years, that we can look at this and we can kind of laugh about the fact that humanity really hasn't changed that much. So, Father, may we take these words, may we take this wisdom, may we see it, may we apply it to our own lives so we don't end up in the pitfalls that so many people do, that we would use this as wisdom, that we would use this as guidance in many ways, that we would use it to encourage other people, to encourage our children as we parent them, that we can point to Scripture and say, see, this is wisdom. This is the way God has wired us, and this is the way the enemy is trying to deceive us. So, Father, thank you for preserving these scriptures for us. Thank you for giving us this time and this place and this beautiful country where we can come and we can celebrate and study and be discipled freely. So, Father, I pray that you would bless these disciples, that you'd give them back the time that they've spent here learning your word tonight. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.